Welcome to a video where I'm going to make my prediction for the final of the 2023 Toronto Masters. So it is between Jannik Sinner of Italy, from the German-speaking part of Italy, and Alex de Minaur from Australia. Will be a pretty interesting match. First things first, though, let's see who they had played to get to the final. When we look at Sinner, his pathway, is going to be a little bit easier. Him being a seed, he had Berrettini up first, which is not the easiest opponent to have, but he did well enough there and was lucky enough to get a walkover over Andy Murray after he had a bit of a tough time earlier in the tournament, a big long match just previously. Then from there, Jannik Sinner was up against Gael Monfils, who is had a pretty good run, really, although hasn't been playing for a long time. So he had his difficulties there against Monfils, but as is usually what needs to be done with Monfils, you just need to sort of wait him out. The longer the match goes, the weaker he gets, the more fatigued he gets. It's probably been the main reason why he hasn't really been able to live up to the potential that one might have thought he had, winning 3 junior Grand Slams in the same year when he was in juniors, albeit though the best junior at that time, junior age player at that time, probably would have been Rafa Nadal. And then after that, maybe Gasquet, but they were both playing in seniors at the time. Anyways, moving on from that to the semi-final, Jannik Sinner then had Tommy Paul to go up against, who had just beaten world number one Carlos Alcaraz, but he managed to beat him in 2 fairly tight sets, and then he's through to the final. As for Alex de Minaur, he started off by playing since he wasn't a seed, he had the sort of misfortune of playing a seed. And he played Cameron Norrie, who's a pretty handy player and definitely not one that you'd want to face up front. And he did well enough to beat him there, so that was impressive. Then he had Diallo, who is a local boy, and he had just beaten Dan Evans, who had just won a title. So he'd beaten somebody that was in form. So Diallo is probably not quite as weak as what his ranking might suggest. But again, de Minaur did what he needed to get past. After that, he had a pretty good match against Taylor Fritz. So he's gone 11th seed and then 8th seed. And beating Taylor Fritz in a tiebreak in the first set is always going to be rather impressive. Did lose the second set, but then was able to really run away with it in the third, which is a little bit surprising because, yes, de Minaur is as fit and as fast as they come, but when you're having to rely on always running around and doing all the work in the points instead of having the power to just finish off the points quickly like so many of his real top class opponents have, it was sort of surprising to see him run away with it at the end. Then after that, though, he had the real big match of his, beating Medvedev, number 2 seed, in 2 straight sets and winning a tiebreak there as well. So really, really impressive performance there to beat such a highly ranked player. And as we'll see in de Minaur's record afterwards, he's not somebody who normally does real well against higher ranked players. And then he beat Davidovich Fokina, who can be amazing, but can be prone to implode. And there was a bit of that in this match. Now, I want to show you something that might give a bit of an indication as to who might win this match. Not just the 4-0 head-to-head between the two players, but this here is their records prior to this tournament about who they have played and their performances against them on hard court masters. And as we can see, player on the left seems to have a lot of struggles against lots of different players, having a losing record against almost everybody, even just against players that are ranked outside the top 100 and don't have a winning record. And we can definitely see when they're up against top 20 players, they're only winning 30% of the time, which is not great at all. If we look at the player on the right, they have a much better record, winning 62% of their matches against top 20 players, more than double what player on the left has. They also have a 100% record against players outside the top 100, although it has been only one match. But they have an amazingly good record of 62% against players ranked higher than them, which is quite impressive. And yeah, quite notably, has some pretty handy results as well against top 5 and top 10 players, and a one-off win against a world number 1. So player number the scores or the results of the player on the right hand side is clearly quite a lot better than the player on the left. So we really shouldn't expect things to be that competitive based on this. Lastly, they have played a few times before. Sinner has won all 4. It's not normally been that competitive, and I feel like this time around it's probably going to go the same way. Although I would say, quite importantly though, that de Minaur may well never get to another Masters final again, because they're extremely hard to get to. You have to play tough guys right from the start, and if you're not seeded, you have to beat 5 reasonably tough people to get into the final. As we saw, de Minaur had to beat a number of seeds to get here. Sinner, though, being as talented as he is, he's got a very long future in the sport, barring injuries, and he could really make a number more Masters finals. He already has lost 2, but he did make a better fist of things early this year, losing in 2 tightish sets to Medvedev in Miami. However, de Minaur has just beaten Medvedev on a similar hardcore in North America. So yeah, it might not be as tight as one might think, but I definitely think that everything's really pointing in the direction of Jannik Sinner winning again. I think he's just got too many weapons. He's very similarly fast to de Minaur, but he's got a lot more power on the forehand and backhand. He's taller, he's agile, he's just got a lot of very positive attributes. And realistically, as soon as Alcaraz was out of the tournament, this was his tournament to win, and he really should. It should be the first of many Masters titles, and really he should be going quite deep into Grand Slams. Also, last little thing I'll mention, despite de Minaur seemingly been around for a very long time and Sinner somewhat seeming to burst onto the scene, there's only about a 2-year age gap between the two. So they're both very young. You could see improvement from both in the years to come, but one would think de Minaur's probably a lot closer to his peak than what Sinner is, especially given Sinner's late start to his tennis career. So yeah, that's my verdict. Hope you've enjoyed this video, and there'll be many more to come.